Is it possible, before we finish up, that you can put up the flyer for Underground for tomorrow night, and we can do invitation to folks?
Yes. Hello,
At the next
everyone.
light, turn right.
This is Marguerite Hill with MuslimARC, and I'm really excited to have you all here. Let me try to go to my layout. So my name is Marguerite Hill. I'm the programming director of MuslimARC. We have a really great program with our esteemed panelists. And I'm not going to put it without any particular order of importance because they all are important and amazing. We have Sagirah Shahid, and she'll introduce herself shortly. Reverend Kelvin Sauls. We have Tabari Zahir, and we also have our executive director, Janara Wahid, who will be weighing in. So I just kind of want to dive in, and maybe we could start with some brief intros. If you could let us know where you're dialing in from and what organizations or projects that you're working on. So maybe we could start, we'll kind of go from the east to the west coast. So Sagirah, can you share a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sagirah Shahid. I'm a poet from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Happy to be here with you all. I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that in community, but it's all love and solidarity with people all over the world and with the people across the United States. Yeah, I'll pass it on to whoever else, but gratitude.
Maybe we could have Tabari. Can you introduce yourself and what projects you're working on?
Absolutely. Salam, everyone. Good day. My name is Tabari Zahir. I am the founder of the Lamps of Light Project, which is a behavioral health organization set up here in Southern California. We provide prevention services, trying to help people from falling into different type of mental health challenges and addictions. We also provide treatment for people who, one way or another, they fell through the cracks. I also engage the community in a couple of different ways. I work as a chaplain at several institutions. I also do a lot of community engagement. A lot of reaching out, talking to the community, usually about psycho-spiritual issues. And in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's what I do. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Margaret.
Let's take it to our good Reverend Kelvin Sauls. Can you share some more about yourself? Where are you dialing in from? That's significant in this moment and what you're working on. Let's see, we may have a little...
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. We may have a little delay, but I will just keep on talking. I am a faith-rooted community organizer based in Los Angeles, California. I do my organizing right now with an organization called Live Free USA, and I am the statewide organizer here in California. And I am basically an intersectionalist. I do the faith-rooted organizing that I do at the intersection of faith, at the intersection of um, uh, immigration, homelessness, dealing with the carceral system, as well as doing some transnational work in South Africa, where I was born and raised. And basically, a progressive, prophetic, organizer. And the projects that I'm working on, right now is basically, building the agency and capacity of grassroots organizations, throughout California. I was just in San Diego, and I'm en route back to Los Angeles, and kind of pulled over off the freeway to take this call in San Clemente. And my time in San Diego was really working with several organizations from San Diego County, Imperial Valley, around the areas of economic equity, especially with what's going on in San Diego and the Imperial Valley around issues, of inequity. Spend some time with our folk at PANA, the partnership to advance new Americans, our siblings who were impacted by the shooting that took place at the Islamic Center. So just wonderful to just check on them and be with them. I would say right now, probably the primary piece I'm working on is to see how we can come together, in a multi-faith, multi-racial, multi-regional way to see how we can reimagine a ferocious and contagious soul force just to deal with the onslaught of empire, both locally, nationally here in the United States, as well as globally.
Thank you so much. Such powerful, our guests are doing powerful, important, life-giving work. They're doing sacred work. I want to next introduce our executive director, Janara Wahid. Can you tell us what you're working on? You're working on a lot and you've been working on things. So I'm going to bring on Janara to share, and then we'll get right after he shares, we'll get into the conversation.
So my name is Janara Wahid. I'm currently driving, stopped for a few minutes to do this program. But the thing that I'm really excited about is some of the work with MuslimARC, that we're making sure people understand some of the important work that we're doing. Usually we're behind the scenes. So this is one of the hardest parts of selling an idea, that it's kind of like when the sun rises, no one will say anything until the sun doesn't rise, right? So the work in the background is very important. It's needed and necessary. So we do a lot of trainings. We do a lot of educating the educators. And because of that type of work, it's just, talking to people about MuslimARC, trying to bring out some of the highlights of the last 10 and now 11 years of MuslimARC work, how in any of these crises we're there with the community, not just holding hands, but also holding hands and helping in the instructions of how to move forward. So MuslimARC is very active in the community. We have, after June, of course, it's July, and then Black August. We have a Black August event coming up as well. And trying to keep people aware of those people who are in the background that did the work before us. And one thing about Juneteenth that's very critical is that the narrative behind Juneteenth is a lot of times we forget that it was not just them trying to free us. It was us trying to free us. So a lot of the narratives say Abraham Lincoln and, people did their work. We're not going to discount, but we want to highlight some of the people who actually did the work behind the scenes, like our sister soldier, Harriet Tubman, right? Some of the work that she did was impeccable for the military because no one else could do the work. And these individuals who were in the military who pushed the issue that this is not just about states' rights, this is about our freedom. And because they had to shift that narrative, this is how we got our freedom. We fought for it on all sides. So just keeping that in mind as we move forward, and thinking about us as people freeing ourselves and not so much falling into the narrative that someone rescued us. We were active participants in the freedom. And this is something that's critical. When we think of Juneteenth, I know a lot of people would say it was co-opted all of a sudden, right? But at the same time, we need to celebrate our wins. So I'll pass it back to Marguerite. Hopefully I didn't go, on a tangent.
We really needed that grounding, and that all of you are doing work that really, really expands like human dignity and the struggle, right, for the constant struggle for freedom and liberation. So on Juneteenth, it's celebrated, we commemorate it on the 19th. June 19th, 1865 is the day that enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas were finally received word of their freedom. That was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. It really, for us, it marks that delayed enforcement of freedom for 250,000 enslaved people. Many of us, myself included, are ancestors of, those are our ancestors that without that enforcement of freedom, right, without this continual liberation struggle, that we would be in that we would be enslaved, and many, we could argue that there are still chains, right, that people have. There are many ways that people are enslaved, and it's acceptable in our society, and it's acceptable globally. And so honoring this day is that reminder. It's not just like when I was growing up, it was like, that's when I had my summer outfit, the summer fits that I was going to wear. And then you just, you wear your best fit, and we go to the Juneteenth festival and we connect with our friends. It was deeper than that. And it took me a while to have to learn that. And so I'm really excited for us to kind of go on a deeper dive into the conversation around Juneteenth. And so what I would like to ask each of our panelists is, when you think about Juneteenth, what does it represent to you, besides the picnics and the soul food? So what does it represent besides that historical moment, in this time in 2026? Who would like to go first?
Can I start?
Yeah.
Only because I want to piggyback off of what our brother just mentioned about narratives, especially as a poet. That's kind of what I'm thinking about most when I think about Juneteenth, is how powerful the narrative of the fact that we were active participants in our liberation. So I think about beyond the history, or including that history, is that it is important to recognize the power of the stories we tell ourselves internally and the stories that we speak into existence, and that we really empower our communities to recognize the power of storytelling and narrative, because everything starts out with an idea. And it took people actively fighting for that liberation and that freedom, and believing in that liberation could happen for us to receive it. I also think about the story and like how we are stewards of stories, and how it wasn't just that people gave us Juneteenth. The people of Texas decided that we're going to celebrate this day. We're going to celebrate it every year, and we're going to pass it along. And it became a part of the larger diaspora beyond Texas, right? And I think there's really power in that, because the narrative could have been that this day would have never been remembered. And I also think a lot about how Juneteenth and Memorial Day have a connection, right? Memorial Day started out as a Black celebration, right? talking about how people fought during the Civil War to emancipate us, right? A lot of us enslaved descendants of enslaved Africans participated in that and died. And so it was our community that started Memorial Day, and it started honoring the people who lost their lives to liberate themselves without even seeing freedom, and how that a narrative around Memorial Day has been appropriated to such an extent that people don't even know that connection. And so we have a huge responsibility as people who are visionaries, who are envisioning the future of the direction of where we could go. And so Juneteenth, I think a lot about the power of storytelling, a power of envisioning a possibility, even if you don't know what that possibility could be, and how that persistence and that sustained storytelling as a collective process is so liberatory. And so I want to emphasize just that power of storytelling, and about how beautiful it is that we get to be a part of this legacy as descendants of enslaved Africans, but also thinking about the diaspora. People have celebrated Juneteenth for generations in Mexico because descendants of enslaved Africans had parallel celebrations in Mexico. And so the power of a narrative, of our resiliency, of the stories we tell ourselves, and that determination and resilience to continue to assert our humanity, not relying on our oppressors to control that narrative. So if it wasn't for us telling that story, we wouldn't even know about Juneteenth. We asserted that for ourselves. And so here it is.
Thank you. That's so powerful. So Reverend Kelvin Sauls, as a South African, what are lessons for Juneteenth?
I think for me, let me make sure you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. There's a little bit of a delay, I think.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think for me, Juneteenth, as a Black immigrant from South Africa, has various meanings. And the reason for that is because Juneteenth certainly falls very close to June 16th, which was part of the resistance movement in South Africa led by students, and of course, yesterday we commemorated the 50th anniversary, of the courageous stance that students took, to resist apartheid in South Africa. And it was all around, basically a discriminatory and repressive educational system, where they had to basically learn the oppressor's language and had to be instructed in the oppressor's language. And they basically said no to that. So the proximity of June 16th, to Juneteenth, which is June 19th, really, for me, just connects the transnational, resistance that is displayed in the way of, persistence and perseverance in the struggle. Though the freedom of our ancestors, was delayed, hence Juneteenth, they did not give up on that freedom. They persisted, they persevered until the message came of their liberation. So that's what it shows, to me. Also, the other thing about Juneteenth that I connect with, since certainly very, very, powerfully, is that, freedom and liberation sometimes will be delayed, but it can never be denied. And, empire, occupiers, settlers, oppressors will do whatever they can, to delay freedom, but they never have the power to stop it. And so I certainly stand, between June 16th and June 19th stand on the steadfast and strong shoulders of those young people 50 years ago that persisted and persevered and basically decided that they were not, going to, be denied, freedom, as well as those, in this country. We stand on their strong and steadfast shoulders, their bold backs, reminding us that even though we find ourselves right now in a deliberate strategy, to delay the third reconstruction, right, towards our complete freedom in this country, our folk, in Texas, had shown that, right now in this moment, we have to persist. We have to persevere. We have to do whatever we can to reimagine our resistance, to reimagine our narrative, to reimagine whatever it is that is thrown at us by this current regime, whatever that is. You see, we must persist. We must continue to organize. We must continue to come together, in so many ways to walk and work towards our complete, our freedom, whether it is that freedom that was delayed, that is now being disrupted, and the complete freedom for us in South Africa, because of all the delayed tactics that are still going on to make sure that apartheid is not reformed but truly obliterated. You see, as it pops up its head in so many different places, whether it is in Palestine, whether it is, right now here as we are facing, Jim Crow 2.0. So that's what I take, from Juneteenth, and from June 16th, you see, as we continue to move, together, one voice, one people saying, backwards never, forward ever.
Thank you so much. Such powerful. I'm just, you're all just really inspiring me. Tabari, I know you have you've been guiding our community for so long. What does Juneteenth, what are lessons from Juneteenth mean beyond that historical moment and for your work now and for the communities that you serve?
Yes, what I would like to do right now is kind of piggyback off of what our sister Sagirah said and what Reverend Kelvin, like as you said, very, 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 very powerful. And so I think they both gave us very powerful narratives. They brought in some history, they brought in the legacy. What I would like to do right now is just, when I think about Juneteenth and I think about what it has to mean today. So I want to give some action items. And I want to give some action items because of the current climate. The climate today from the highest levels of the federal government is to try to erase those narratives that Sister Sagirah talked about. They want to try to reinstall, American apartheid, as Reverend Sauls mentioned. And our duty is to obliterate it, like he said. So what I would like to see is not so much of the partying and the picnics and things like that. But what I would like to see is, let's call, number one, calls for accurate historical narrative, because this is trying to be the federal government right now is trying to erase history, the contribution of, enslaved Africans to America and their descendants. They're trying to erase it. So we need to be calling for the accurate historical narrative. I think that we need to call for more emphasis on teaching beyond the Emancipation Proclamation to include, Black resilience. We have to emphasize local histories and, and explain how it's gone through these different transformations. So from the crimes of slavery all the way up to today, mass incarceration. When I think of Juneteenth, I think of the work that needs to be done. We need community-led history projects in every community. And just to take California, like we're here in the IE, we need to have this in San Bernardino. We need to have this in Riverside, counties, all the way through Los Angeles County, up through Kern County. We need oral histories. We need public exhibits, that center, survivor testimonies, local organizers, giving their narratives, explaining how their community has been resilient against all odds. And the reason why I'm saying that is because this next generation is going to need this. They're going to need it. We have to repackage it on social media. We have to repackage it on video, for this new generation, if we want them to continue the work. So I just wanted to lay out some action items, not so much my sentiment, but these are the things that I have to do to take this work forward.
Thank you. I am taking notes. So this call for, and I'll rewrite it at the end because we're going to put together our call for action and our marching orders, right? It's the call for, we need to call for the accurate historical narrative around slavery, but also the resilience of the descendants, the victims of this crime and their descendants who are consistently faced both repression, displacement, and violence. Teach beyond the Emancipation Proclamation, the local histories, those victories, right? That we need community-led projects. And these are the oral histories, and to display these in public exhibits, right? We could share those histories through poems too, like we need to make sure that we're carrying on the oral narratives and our material culture and our cultural reproduction, right, is to highlight our survival strategies, our thriving despite these obstacles. So I'm truly inspired, and I feel like you're all part of this project and sharing that we're not alone, right? That our being part of the African diaspora, we are not alone, and that we get free together. Right, we see these parallels between South Africa and America, and there's always a connection with the Black Atlantic. So, the work continues, and we're going to continue with the next part of our conversation. So we have about a half hour, and I want to kind of lean in specifically to each person's work on our panel, because you're all doing very specific things, but they're pieces of the puzzle, right, to our collective liberation. And so, Sagirah, I want you to lead us off and to talk about poetry and art, how poetry and art can help us preserve memory and imagine new futures. How do you see the creative practice as contributing to this liberatory work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brother Tabari outlines it with that call to action a bit. As artists, it is our responsibility to envision the possibilities of the future, and to resist fascism and erasure and all these different things. And so that, I think, in terms of what artists can do in general, it can kind of answer that call, but also it can construct those future possibilities. In my mind, I just wanted to connect this question a little bit to what this earlier conversation was, because I was thinking a lot about, and I don't want to be too long-winded, but I've been thinking a lot about fascism from the point of view of like Italy, like, Mussolini and that period of time, and how resilient Black communities were in resisting that, and how the narrative, and thinking about how, when I think about like fascism in general, I think about a lot about like with Mussolini's Italy, thinking about how there are a lot of parallels to what's happening now, and thinking about how it impacted Ethiopia and the East Africa, and also impacted Black people here. And as a student of poetry, my entry point into learning about that history was actually through poetry, through the Harlem Renaissance era poets, and thinking about like what Black people were doing during that time period. So there's a poem by Claude McKay called If We Must Die, who was a Jamaican leftist poet, and it kind of went the version of viral for that period of time. And it was a fighting poem because this is like the summer of 1919, the Red Summer, where there were a lot of lynchings and things of that nature, attacks on Black communities. But that was happening simultaneously as fascism was happening in Europe as well. And while Black people were resisting our own lynchings, resisting racism, resisting the depression. A lot of times when people think about the depression, they always like erase us from that. We were living our lives, building the Harlem Renaissance, this period of time that we think about people thriving. The world was modeling or paying attention to Black literature, thinkers, and creativity during that period of time. But connecting it back to Mussolini, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but and thinking about fascism lately, is that Black people provided material support to Ethiopia, and a lot of people don't know about this history. And a lot of the Harlem Renaissance, like people of that period of time, and not only New York, but also in Chicago and other places across the United States and in parts of the Caribbean, materially sent support to help Ethiopia defeat Mussolini, a fascist. And it wasn't just, they were fundraising, they were protesting, thousands of people, like tens of thousands of people were protesting, organizing, sending material aid. They actually trained people to send fighters. And the government, our American government, disrupted that organizing because they recognized that it was too much power for Black people. We did end up sending a pilot to Ethiopia that trained other pilots in Ethiopia. This is when, aviation as a tool of warfare was new. But I guess my point is, like, we were active participants in our own liberation. We were also active participation in the liberation of our comrades and our kinfolk in other countries in solidarity with the Black diaspora. And we were able to defeat racism, or we were able to participate in our victories here at home, but also abroad. And so I wanted to highlight that my entry point to that history was a poem. And the reason why I've been thinking about Claude McKay's If We Must Die is because there's a poem that kind of chimes, as we call it, with that poem that became popular recently, again, written by Rafat Adarir, a Palestinian poet who was murdered by the Israeli forces. And he wrote a poem that is in dialogue with that. He was a student of the Harlem Renaissance, and he was inspired by Claude McKay. And his poem was If I Must Live. And so thinking a lot about how our different struggles are intertwined, but also thinking about how art can be that entry point to educate people about it, to create and envision strategies to resist. And then locally in Minnesota, I know that artists have been on the forefront of, again, constructing the narrative that even the self-talk that we have to disrupt the programming of a fascist regime or some kind of propaganda, to disrupt that. A lot of times art is the disruptor, and our opposition knows that. This is why the Hollywood invests so much in military propaganda and these kinds of natures, because narratives can start revolutions, they can transform lives. I could go on a whole other thing about cinema and how those narratives work, especially with like Birth of a Nation and other things. But my point is, creativity is a tool. It's not a tool that is inherently good or bad, but it is a tool that is powerful. Our opposition recognizes that power, and we have to study that history. We have to utilize this tool and for our advantage. And art can be a great way to not only preserve, to resist, but to envision the future. I'm rambling, so I'm gonna stop.
You are not rambling. These are all really brilliant. You brought up so many brilliant points and gems and things we hope to pick back up. And we want to remix these conversations because I would love to have you in conversation with our filmmakers, our storytelling. I know Reverend Kelvin Sauls, you worked on a film. It was a diasporic film that brought together things. So there's just such important work. So yeah, like for you talked about like some healing work. And I think that kind of bridges nicely with Tabari's work on healing and trauma and maybe talking about the mental and spiritual chains. So how do you see the important work that you do as breaking those chains? Yep, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So thank you so much, Marguerite. One of the things that one of the reasons why we started the Lamps of Light project was so that we could help to destigmatize, to destigmatize, mental health and overall well-being. The you have to see mental health in the Black communities, by framing it like as of like a collective right? It's not a personal failure. We have so much transgenerational trauma. We have so much historical trauma, including, starting from slavery down through Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and what's, continuing. Yeah, like there's this ongoing impact. And so we look at, mental health in the Black community and in the Samina community, also in the Muslim community, as like, this is it's a liberation matter. In other words, we have this, idea of purifying the soul within Islam. We have this idea of purifying the soul, becoming free, becoming unchained, from the shackles of the self. And the way that you have to deliver it to those who need it the most is, first and foremost, you have to destigmatize it. It has to be destigmatized. This is a large portion of the work that I do. Is I just go into communities. I've been, in Arab communities. I've been in African communities. I've been in Sudani communities. I've been in Senegalese communities, Nigerian communities, talking about this, right? That healing is a right. You don't look at it through the eyes of failure. Okay. And then how do you do that? That becomes the next question. All right. How is it done? You have to integrate all of this spiritual resources with the clinical care. If you just have clinical care, you're going to fall short. But if you infuse it with faith, those faith-informed strengths, like the spiritual virtue, whether you're, spiritual virtues such as hope, a hope that's it's not dreamy, it's not ethereal, right? It's something, that you're working for because you trust in the Almighty. You believe, in the Almighty, that He will give you healing, that He will set you free, from the things that we've imposed on ourselves and those things that have been imposed on us by unjust systems. And so, you integrate your spiritual resources. You have your rituals. You look at, your community supports, whether you're looking at imams or you're looking at pastors or you're looking at community activists. They have to also know how to work with people without re-traumatizing them. All right. And lastly, what I would say is that also you healing is also like a political act. What do I mean by that? Because when you invest in like community-led healing circles, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through storytelling, whether it's through like, different memorials that honor survivors, or, it honors, the work of organizers, things like that, it helps the entire community heal, to see what they contributed, what they can contribute. And that's how it becomes, like a political act, breaking off, chains that were purposely put into place to make people lose hope, to make people think that they are lower than, that they are less than, And so that's what we try to do. We try to center, this joy, this resilience, reframing liberation around life, especially healing, affirming the future through hope, and not just removing oppression, not just the absence of oppression, but actually, engaging a beautiful future. And I hope that's helpful.
Well, it's definitely deeply inspiring. And, some of the things that are just really coming to mind as, and this is before I hand it off to Reverend Kelvin Sauls, because he always has really, like both beautiful language, right? And full of metaphors and just a rich language. But one of the things that I'm thinking about for Juneteenth, before I knew the meaning of the holiday, growing up, I used to have a lot of shame around the history of my ancestors, but understanding both within, when we get into our theology, like our shared theology as Muslims and Christians, and the experience of oppression, of enslavement, are no longer things to be ashamed about, right? That struggle for freedom and that resilience are things that create that spiritual bond of our spiritual ancestors, of those who were liberated out from Pharaoh, right? So this is like during Muharram is like a very sacred time for us, because during Ashura, like it marks that is like the parting of the Red Sea, of Yusuf becoming free from incarceration, according to many of the traditions. So these are things that are significant, where there is this shame that was imposed upon us. So I want to, I think that Reverend Kelvin Sauls, you can lean in and share some of your thoughts around how we can learn from the BDS movement in South Africa, around the struggle for reparations in the United States, around the struggles, right, like that we're facing with the threat of Black lives, right, in the United States and beyond globally. How can we move beyond the kind of symbolic solidarity to like that real collective liberation?
Thanks for that question, Marguerite. I think it's now more than ever. Solidarity cannot just be symbolic anymore. It has to be real. It has to be relevant, and it is a matter of urgency. And the reason why I say it's a matter of urgency is because, here in the United States, our fight right now, right, is not just about, fighting voter suppression, right? Our fight right now in the United States has become, right, now a fight against erasure. The erasure of who we are, the erasure of our history, the erasure of our experience in this country, right? And people all over the world are taking note of this, especially, the descendants of occupiers and settlers in South Africa. There is a a collusion that's going on from the southern tip of Africa to North America as it relates to this. So we're talking about really a regime emanating from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue that is about our erasure, that is about our elimination, right? It's not just our marginalization, it's about our elimination. I dare say it's a regime that is committed to our extraction, you know, and I can go even further by saying it's a regime that are looking for all kinds of ways, right, to facilitate our extinction. Because the very fact that we are still here in 2026, right, is something that that these 250 years, right, just cannot handle, right? And we know it's longer than 250 years because our ancestors arrived here in 1619, and they arrived here, those 8 that arrived in 1619, they arrived here having gone through the Middle Passage. Imagine the trauma of what they've seen and experienced, right? Imagine the pain, the disaster. Imagine, you know, the depression that they may have gone through, you know, but they arrived here, you know, and so we ought to, you know, get to know and understand that us thriving today is because they survived, you know, the system of human trafficking by way of enslavement. All right, and that right now is just, you know, infathomable, right? They named, you know, the place of their departure out of West Africa, the, you know, the gate of no return, right? That has been defied now, right? Because night has become the gate of eventual return, you know. So around every corner, we see systems and schemes being put in place to see how it is that, one, they can erase, they can eliminate, they can extract, and they can bring us to extinction. And if they cannot do that, they don't want to be held accountable for what has happened, you know, since our ancestors arrived in 1690, right? Because of a culture of deception and denial, a culture of, you know, displacement and discrimination. And so the movement of repair that I am proud to be a part of, you know, through Live Free, you know, and the alliance, you know, called ART, you know, working on truth and reconciliation here. What we are saying right now with the current legislation in the state of California, AB 2599, which we have passed, you know, in the Assembly and is making its way to the Senate, you know, this particular legislation is called Truth and Disclosure. And it's basically saying to corporations, you know, who have, you know, built wealth, you know, by way of chattel slavery, you know, you need to disclose, right? You know, and show us the receipts of how you have, you know, exploited, you know, and abused, you know, our ancestors by way of chattel slavery, right? And we will then move towards accountability and see what that needs to look like. That is so important because you see, you know, there cannot be authentic reconciliation until there is audacious conciliation, right? And the movement to repair is about, you know, righting a wrong. It's about accountability because of the inhumanity that took place. And in California, we are leading that fight for the country, and I dare say for the world. As a Black South African, you know, that fight, you know, will continue there because of what has happened, you know, since, you know, 1492 in South Africa when the Portuguese showed up, and after that the Dutch and then the English, right? And their descendants are still there, living large, right? off the backs, of my ancestors and the young people that we just celebrated. So I think, this is a matter of urgency now more than ever. We have to come together and reimagine our movement of resistance by way of resilience, to see how we can move the needle, towards the restoration, of the humanity and the dignity and the generational wealth, you see, that was stripped away from, our ancestors, around that. And so that's really, part of, of the work that needs to be done, as we move forward around that. Let me stop there, to give, my colleagues an opportunity to respond as well.
So thank you so much. I mean, these are all, from organizing to supporting artists to focusing on care as a collective duty, as a right. These are all like really, really powerful ways that we can work to in the Black freedom struggle. And so, Gennaro, maybe you can like weigh in a little bit about, the how our work ties into that, and and also like what your lifelong work has been.
Yeah, thank you, everyone in the panelists as well. Like I said before about the background work, I always think of Harriet Tubman and the soldiering she did in the background, connecting troops, connecting supply trains, as well as information from north to south and south to north. I look at how she translated codes and made sure that people on both sides knew who and who to contact, when to contact them, and things of this nature. These are critical points because we don't know inside of the North. We think the North were all our allies, right? But as we mentioned about the Emancipation Proclamation, to proclaim transfer of ownership, right? And to realize that what was really happening was a accounting transaction, and that the North had an ulterior motive to cripple the South financially by taking all of the books off of all the finances off the books of the South, by saying no longer can you go to our creditors or any of the creditors to get credit using slaves as part of your assets. And what I think of as far as our work as MuslimARC is actually being the individuals who go and look at the true nature of what's really going on, going to the academics, going to the individuals and doing that research to find out what's really going on behind that policy you just passed, what is really going on in the community. So we connect directly with those people impacted, those community people who serve those communities impacted, and we go directly to those people in power. We, as an organization, have been there in the backgrounds like Harriet Tubman, moving the needle, letting people know what their plans are over on the other side. Because a lot of times we are in the halls of power, and there's sometimes no way to get the messages to our people, because you're in the hall of power knowing what's happening with the messages, but how do you get that information out? And a lot of times we're there. We're in those circles, we're in those committee meetings, we're partnering with these people in the committee meetings. As MuslimARC, we take that information and do the research and give it to the community in a way in which they can digest it, by training those people who directly impact those communities and being a resource to the community. So I see a lot of connection between like the work that we do as MuslimARC, as the work as Harriet Tubman, and of course as our founder Margaret Hill. one of my sheroes, right? And the work that she did to make all this stuff possible. And one of the things that I want to make sure people know as well is we have to fund ourselves in our own freedom. Like in Juneteenth, we might be working within institutions, moving these pieces, but they're not going to fund our liberation. We got to do what we need to do to make sure we're free. We got to do what we need to do to make sure we're taking care of each other. And this is what MuslimARC did, even during Ramadan, trying to create a way that we can help people who are having trouble during Ramadan, right? We have to find these ways. We have to ask the people too, because we don't know all the answers. We know the people who are on the ground have their own freedom, a way to find their freedom. And sometimes all it is we're connecting them to that road and map that they gave us, right? And this is the work of MuslimARC. We're connecting these things and making these bridges, bringing the information to the community and showing other members of the community. Sometimes they're saying they're allies, but don't know how to be an ally. So sometimes we got to do some training. And this is critical because people want to help you, but sometimes they don't know how. How do we connect these people? Like we have Reverend Sauls, Live Free, right? The arts, and of course, mental health. The thing about what I think Tabari said, which is critical, is we have to reclaim our mental health by naming those people who traumatized us and saying that they're still traumatizing us. Naming it and saying this is what happened. But at the same time taking responsibility for our own mental health and saying that we're not going to rely on them to free us from their bondage of mental enslavement. And I think Tabari in his work has done that. Reverend Sauls in his work has said, look, this is an international thing we are doing here. If your freedom is tied to my freedom is tied to your freedom. And you can never forget the arts, because in all things, as they say, you wonder why the caged bird sings, right? They wonder why we're celebratory in the case of this trauma and these other things. We sing in sorrow and joy because we're living a life that God has given us. And in whatever capacity we live that, we're going to find joy because we are given the opportunity to live it. And we fight through it. And I felt like the sister now. Am I rambling? Let me stop.
You have so much to say. I mean, and so much guidance. I mean, you are all like deeply inspiring. So as we close out, because this hour was too short, we need to convene you all for a whole weekend, a week. We need a retreat to get this, to get our blueprint down. But we'll find ways to get together. We will conspire. We will convene. We will get together and continue this work, not just online, but on the ground, because our work is national, it's transnational, and it's intergenerational. Before you leave out, can you share just one thing that someone can do during Juneteenth that can inspire them to move the needle towards freedom? So who would like to give an offer up? Like we have our action item, and I got to rewrite those action items. I tried to put those into the comments, but they'll.
Ladies first.
I'll go. I will probably, start by just saying that Juneteenth is not a day off. I think that's very, very important for us to understand. It's not a day off. It's a day on. It's a day for us to be on, fighting for racial justice. It is a day for us to be on, resisting, the threat of erasure by any means necessary. It's a day on for us to make sure we reclaim our narrative, which is a liberative narrative birthed, out of, Black theology. It's a day on for us to connect the careless and dangerous dots, right? All of the fight that we are in, right now. On June 16th, Tupac would have been 55 years old, right? And Tupac made it plain. You see, when he said they got money for wars, but they can't feed the poor, right? All over Southern California, Northern California, all over the country, food insecurity is real, right? But bombs are being dropped, everywhere. And so I think, it is important for us, yes, to find our self-interest, but to let that self-interest become a shared interest. And I think that's what the work of intersectionality invites us into. So I'll just, share those pieces, by just once again saying that this ain't no day off. There is too much trouble in this world for us, to, look at this as just another day to party. If you're going to party, let it be a conscious party.
Yeah. Okay. So who would like to go next with the one thing they need to do, get started by Juneteenth?
I can go next because I was just thinking about how all of our brothers had name dropped some artists to illustrate a point, and I think especially in thinking about the people in Minneapolis who recently had federal charges put upon them as conspiracy charges because they participated in solidarity to resist ICE, and how because they knew their rights and asserted their rights, they were able to push back against that violation of their constitutional rights. And how many times, and I think about how Juneteenth is a story of how the highest documents, the letter of the law, the Constitution, all of these different laws, they started out as ideas and stories that people put pen to paper, and then they had to be implemented. And how until the Juneteenth story is until you know that you have liberation, you have that right, you can't assert that right. And so my Juneteenth call to action is to find a creative way, be it a song, a story, a poem, a short film, a TikTok, whatever it is, to teach someone else their constitutional right. Because right now we have a federal government that's trying to strip away people's constitutional rights. And I know firsthand from lived experience, from the experiences of my relatives and ancestors, that there's power in asserting your rights with community. So find a creative way. And channeling Miss June Jordan and her poem about my rights, find a creative way to teach another person, even if it's one other person, their constitutional right, be it the First Amendment, which not only includes the freedom of expression and of religion, but also the right to petition the government and assembly and all these different parts of the Constitution that protect us, the Fourth Amendment. So find a creative way to teach people their rights and assert those rights.
Thank you. It's very practical.
So I want to definitely go back down the same track as my brother Kelvin Sauls. When he said that it's not Juneteenth is not the time to take a break, right? That's not where we take a break off. The time that we take a break off. So, and he also said if you're going to party, right? Like if you're going to have fun, make it conscious. So again, I want to give some concrete actions towards this, because this is like what I prefer. Even in when I'm having fun, I want it to be leading to something. So I would say that we have to use culture as a vehicle for change. We have to use our culture. We have to use our memory. We have to use, Black genius as we have to remember it, and we have to continue to use it as a change going forward. So how do we do that? You can elevate Black art, right? Support, the African American Museum here in Los Angeles, right? Go there. Like conscious literature, historical literature, critical literature around. Jamaro was talking about Harriet Tubman and the work that she did, right? Embrace that literature, find new ways of getting it out to the new generation, especially through social media. Different ways of storytelling, whether it's poetry, whether it's rap songs, whether it's cartoons, whatever, but it should express these themes of liberation. At a higher level, we can host film screenings. I heard you talking about, Sister Margaret, you mentioned something about, film screenings, right? Performances, different types of exhibits that connects, our present to our past. And then lastly, I just want to say, leverage the social media. I have a, I didn't know anything about social media. Really, my kids put me on, and they helped me to get my message out through social media. That's when I realized how powerful it was, so we have to leverage all the different platforms of social media, do the digital storytelling to spread healing, education, and advocacy. And I'll end right there.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been inspiring and healing. You have all stretched me in new ways, and sometimes you got to get there. You got to get that good stretch. And we have some marching orders during Juneteenth. We're going to honor our legacies, right? And we're going to continue the struggle. And I would like to thank those who've joined us and who will be joining us and watch this program and benefit from your wisdom you have here. That you can follow us on our social media channels. It's MuslimARC. We have a mailing list, and we'll continue to share resources like this and organize panels with our esteemed community members, and we'll continue this work. So be sure to follow us, like us, sign up for our newsletter so that you can stay abreast of more of our programming. And as always, you could support us by going to muslimarc.org/donate. So please, let's continue the work, and we'll see you out there, in community during Juneteenth and beyond.
All right.